At Enbridge, we monitor our pipelines around the clock, using trained operators and computer monitoring systems. Because for us, safety isn't just a job. It's a 24/7 commitment.
Please welcome the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Detroit Regional Chamber, Sandy Baruah. Please welcome back James Blanchard. And please welcome the Consul General of Canada in Detroit, Colin Bird. Senior Counsel at Warner, Norcross, and Judd, Aida Dismondy. And to moderate the discussion, please welcome journalist and author, Devin Scillian.
Thanks very much. Yes, I left television news 3 months ago. Did I miss anything?
We miss you.
Daily Show.
Thank you. Daily Show. Daily Show. Usually when we have this conversation, I start by letting everybody weigh in on the report that we just heard from the region, but I know you're all champing at the bit to really move to tariffs and the trade war, and I'm hesitant to try to even keep you in the barn for even just a moment. So knowing, though, that today is a complicated time to try and even talk about this, I don't even know if we would be much better served by having this conversation on Thursday, because as we've seen, this has changed by the hour. We know how Governor Blanchard feels about the tariffs. I want to let everybody else kind of give me your thumbnail thoughts so far. And I think it's only fair, Colin, to start with the Consul General for Canada. Well, give me your thoughts on where we are.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm afraid Governor Blanchard has stolen all my best lines. He's also almost made me cry, but I've held it together. These are just naturally moist eyes. Because you understand this relationship, and you have been leading here in Michigan to leverage the connection that we have with across this border to help Michigan's prosperity. And, you know, there were a lot of numbers thrown out. And we are in a period of yo-yo tariff policy, which in itself is incredibly disruptive for folks who are having to manage across the border. But one number that wasn't up there that I still think is safe from Jim is 70%, which is the amount of inputs, of exports from Canada into the United States that are inputs into further manufacturing in the United States. And that's about the inverse of what you have with most of your other industrialized trading partners. And what that speaks to is what we do in this region of highly integrated trade. And that's why you see on the slides that you've just witnessed a story about a disproportionate impact, and really this region, and Michigan in particular, being at the epicenter of the risk. And that's what makes it really valuable for me as a Canadian diplomat here in Michigan to know that this is not a Michigan policy. This is a made in Washington problem, and we need to be working together across this border to protect this region together.
Aida, give me your thoughts.
I couldn't agree more with Colin. What it is that I have said also to my clients, your best ally right now are your suppliers. In a time when the federal government has let us down from a trade policy perspective, it is this time when, going back to Governor's remarks, not only to just call our friends, but our business partners, and come together as a united front, because it is through business partners that we will continue these relationships at the time when chaos and insecurity or uncertainty is looming large. Yeah.
And Sandy, I'm holding here a copy of a letter that was sent to, the White House, the Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of Commerce, from you and Glenn Stevens at Machado, urging a pause, if nothing else, but a reconsideration of this policy. You want to expand on the letter?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to congratulate my friend and colleague Glenn. He's done an amazing job really in the national media, taking the lead for the Chamber and Machado, really highlighting what I talked about
that Michigan's economy, Michigan's industries are at a disproportionate risk with the policies that are being considered here. We don't understand what the end game is here. Just to be completely, I'll put on my old political hat for a minute. So when I talk to people who are close to the president, people who are in the administration, Republican members of Congress, et cetera, and they kind of give us the talking points. They say, well, there's going to be short-term pain, and but it's but we're going to bring manufacturing back here. And say, okay, tell me how that's going to happen in a political cycle. Because, best case scenario, it takes 3-4 years to build an automotive plant. It takes about that same amount of time, if you're lucky, to build an aluminum plant, right? So how does, frankly, the Trump administration, from a political standpoint, right, withstand the unemployment that's going to happen, the slowdown in the economy? Potentially we could have another era of stagflation where we have rising prices because of tariffs, but high unemployment because of the slowing of the industries. So that's the point that we tried to make to the two secretaries and the ambassador, the USTR head, trying to say, hey, this is going to have long-term pain. We didn't make the point that I don't think you can handle that.
I thought it was really interesting. It was reported 2 days ago that Stellantis is going to reopen the Belvidere Jeep plant in Illinois. Now, this is a plant that already exists, is built and there, and it's going to take 2 years to get it up and running again. I think there's a broad misunderstanding of how the auto industry sometimes works. Governor Blanchard, though, I look around on the panel here trying to find someone to advocate for the tariffs, and I'm a little lost. So let me just try a little devil's advocate here, though. The White House position is that we're simply matching tariff for tariff. Tariffs already exist against the United States. Shouldn't they be an even playing field? Shouldn't we match like for like? If there's a tariff on something going out, there should be a tariff on something coming in. It would just match the Canadian tariffs, and not just Canadian, but those from other countries.
Well, that sounds logical, but I think what's happened here is our leaders in Washington have created an imaginary universe, kind of an alternate universe, and wanting people to believe it. They feel if they state something long enough, people will believe it. But I don't know, with Canada, for example, they didn't have tariffs on steel and aluminum, for example, which raised, as I mentioned the last time, $1 billion in costs for General Motors and $750 million for Ford. So the facts are simply not there. One of the advisors and I think the president's getting bad advice, and I'm not even sure he's engaged as he pretends to be. But he's getting bad advice. One of his top advisors, who, by the way, recently came out from prison, all right, another felon in the administration, has advocated that if we raise tariffs enough, somehow we can cut the income tax. But he's trying to tell the president and others that tariffs are paid by other countries, not by we, consumers.
Yep.
And so that's simply wrong. So it's hard to argue with something that's so illogical and make-believe. I'm saying that this rift with Canada, which is in Canada, is viewed as far more than that, supreme insult, is made up. The president is trying to slay imaginary dragons that don't exist. By the way, the leader of Citizens Bank, Yasmin, is from London, Ontario. And I'm sure she must agree.
Aida, though, to the point that the United States isn't inventing tariffs. They do exist.
Sure.
Lots of countries impose tariffs on goods.
We use them all the time. They're selective. You use them selectively, where another country has a totally unfair, irrational tariff on us. So we'll respond. Or if they're dumping, if they're selling products here that they don't sell they sell them here cheaper than they do in their country. Yeah, we can use, they're selective. Joe Biden used them. All of our presidents use them.
Yes.
Canada uses them, but not widespread and not in a way that somehow you're going to create an imaginary pot of money so that you can cut taxes for some people but not others. It's just, but I'm going to let the trade expert here respond to
Well, I was going to say,
right?
Aida, I think that you believe that by the kind of trade war and the tariffs that we are trying to levy now, we are actually lessening the impact that we actually need to have. For instance, a group of countries united against, say, IP theft in China, where tariffs would be valuable and important and impactful.
So let me clarify first. You're putting me in a difficult position as far as playing the devil's advocate when I don't want to advocate for it. So
that's why I'm here.
I had to make that disclaimer. So for all of you that are listening, understand my position. But let's look at it as we all know, tariffs have always been around. When there are a risk to a country's economy or a country's industry sector, countries have always had these protectionist agendas for when it comes to goods that are coming into their countries. However, not to this extent. Not to the extent where the entire trade policy or the way how we do business with the world is being shaken to the core, be that for our adversaries and especially for our trading partners and our allies. Because I'm not sure about you, but even in the day-to-day relationships, I'm not sure how one can stay friend by making one a foe. And that is what is happening currently with the trade policy that we are following. To create a balance in trade by not investing in the economy, it's preposterous.
Yeah, just
I agree with Governor Blanchard, who said that. So Governor Blanchard said very well that the president is being ill-advised. I'm not sure, often when I read the news, as many of you are here, I'm not sure who is actually advising the president. Forget about his presence, whether he knows how these implications well work or not, but it is the advisors to the president that carry the responsibility for making the agenda in the way that it is right now.
And remember, when he started out, the man in the White House said, we're levying tariffs on Canada because of the influx of fentanyl and migrants, which is, by the way, non-existent.
It's an excuse.
44 pounds.
It's an excuse.
Colin, jump in.
yeah. So let's just say from the get-go that when the president raised fentanyl and the scourge it is hitting both of our countries, Canada's all in. And we've been all in with the last administration. We were all in on this administration. A lot of that work has to be beyond the border, so around money laundering, around keeping the 97% of the precursors that are coming into our continent from China out of our system. We're all in. It is a pretext when it comes to tariffs because it was the necessary legal basis in order to be able to evade U.S. obligations under our trade agreement. That's why the two conversations have merged. But when it comes to sort of a strict conversation on fentanyl, it is a scourge for both of us, and we are happy to be working together. Similarly on border security, right? So we have worked with the last administration on expanding the Safe Third Country Agreement, changing migration policy. We have a border that works. And we need to keep it that way. So we're all in on that. The proof is that 160-acre facility being built in Detroit, totally financed by the Canadian government, totally built by the Canadian government. It's going to be the crown jewel for Customs and Border Protection in the United States to protect the border. This is a long-standing commitment because it's in our interests as Canada to have that border be secure.
Yeah. And I'll join those who, I love that it's the Gordie Howe Bridge and not the Duracell Snapple.com, whatever. But this is an interesting time of vulnerability for this to happen to Canada. Commentators in Canada have pointed out that Donald Trump has managed to do what nobody in Canada was able to do, which is unite the 5 Canadian political parties. But you're in the middle, and I would not dare to ask you to weigh in what's going to happen politically in Canada, but you're in the middle of a shakeup in the Canadian government, and does that create vulnerability right now for how Canada should or shouldn't respond?
Well, your first point was there, and I'm certainly not going to weigh into that.
Yeah,
That's beyond my remit.
Sure.
But the reality is that this has really forced Canada to look at internal barriers to trade that we should have been dealing with a long time ago. And this has brought a consensus to the Canadian establishment. We can gain 4 percentage points of GDP by reducing those barriers internally. We're looking at a 2.5% hit to GDP from the tariffs. So it is spurring us to think. It's spurring us to have conversations with other trading partners.
Yeah.
As the rest of the world is expecting to be next in this cycle, how do we reimagine some trading arrangements that, frankly, we have not put enough effort into because this has been such an easy, effective relationship that we've had with the United States. Yeah. So it's forcing us to be more creative, and it's uniting Canadians in a way that I've never seen and makes me proud as a Canadian.
That's something, isn't it? Sandy, it was estimated by Peter Navarro over the weekend that this could be a $700 billion a year influx of money, their way of thinking for the U.S. government, $100 billion of which would come from the auto sector. So to kind of jump on your metaphor from a while ago and to paraphrase Coleman Young, the rest of the country gets a cold, we get pneumonia on this. But that's not to say there's not a constituency in Michigan for what's about to happen. The United Auto Workers talk about creating unusual bedfellows. The United Auto Workers like this idea.
Well, so let's be super candid here. The UAW, their business model is to drive more membership within the UAW. Their business model is not about broader economic growth or employment growth. It's more membership into the UAW. I don't fault them for that. It just is what it is. So let's put that $750 billion number in context. It won't cost the auto industry $750 billion. It'll cost us as consumers $750 billion. So, and this is something the governor and I have talked about. What I don't understand the logic of saying that, okay, what we want to do as the administration, which is noble, is to extend the 2017 tax cuts. Okay, we support that, we get that. But in order to do those tax cuts or extend those tax cuts and do additional tax cuts, we need to raise taxes over here, right? Because tariffs are taxes. So I don't understand how the tax cut or tax cuts are beneficial if we're creating a whole new set of taxes over here. So again, I don't see the end game. I don't see the political path forward on this. So yeah, it could be $750 billion, but also if you raise, okay, so depending on what kind of vehicle it is, and where it's built, where the parts are, and what its price point are, if the manufacturers don't eat any of the costs, and let's face it, the auto companies have relatively small margins to begin with, an imported high-end car, like say a Mercedes S-Class or something like that, that price could go up by about $12,000. It's an imported car, high-content car, very expensive car. Yep. Something a little bit more, that us mere mortals could afford, could go up $3,000 to $4,000. So what are those price increases going to do? It's going to suppress demand. So the number of cars that we sell now is not going to be the number of cars we sell tomorrow. In fact, just in the last 3 months, Cox Automotive has downgraded the U.S. automotive sales number twice already. I think they're down about 600,000 vehicles from where they started the year.
Yeah. Governor, I want to stay with the UAW for just a second because of the long-standing alliance I think the Democrats have felt with union workers. What are your thoughts on the UAW's support of this?
Well, let me say first that I have a 50-year relationship, 60 actually. And I was a UAW appointee on the Chrysler board after they came out of bankruptcy, the Obama program. So I'm grateful for that. And Sean Fain, I think, is a very effective UAW leader for his members. And I'm pleased that he's generally a Democrat and supports people like Alyssa Slotkin and Gary Peters. But I think...
Well, he notably supported Kamala Harris rather than Donald Trump, and now they find themselves aligned.
I think he's hoping that the promises of the president will be realized sooner than later. And I'm worried they won't at all because they're based on imaginary scenarios. But it's hard to fault a leader of a group to want more members. But I would remind everyone again that, first of all, this integrated economy has been a blessing. Our auto industry wanted integration when they created the Auto Pact with Canada. They were already making cars in Canada anyway, and they were making them here. They had actually...
Remind me how you felt about the original Canadian-Mexican, when NAFTA, because it was ratified, I believe, just after you left office.
My job was to get it done in Canada. It was not to get it done in Mexico.
Right.
We got it done. And I don't think you could name a single plant in Michigan that closed because of something that went on in Canada at all. We've had an integrated economy with them since 1965. In fact, originally the United Auto Workers were the same union in Canada as here. Now they're separate, so maybe the politics is a little different. But I think the integrated economy with Canada is a blessing, has been a blessing, is a blessing, should continue, probably should be strengthened. But I'm not going to fault Sean Fain for wanting to think that some plants will close and they will open up. By the way, if that does happen, it'll be two presidents from now probably who will be continually apologizing for the way we treated Canada during this era of our politics. So I'm just... I want to look at the bright side of things, which is why I want to see how we strengthen relations with Canada. It starts with all of us.
Aida, our conversations before this, in fact, I think you were making the point that whatever administration follows this, let's not start with the third Trump administration.
No, please don't.
That's a whole other conversation. But you believe that it's going to take 4 to 8 years to unravel and disentangle where we are?
Well, if not more. And why do I say that? Earlier, it was said that it takes about 3 to 4 years to build a plant. Right now, what we have created is a complete uncertainty and a reliability into the U.S., the way how U.S. does trade or does business with the world. We are damaging our relationship with our trading partners. The next administration that will come in will have to do damage control. The administration after that will have to wait for that impact of damage control to happen so that we can see progress happening and the relationships being stabilized in a way that perhaps we can have, all of us in the world can have some certainty by the way how we do business. But we are shaking at the core all of our relationships, especially, and I cannot stress this enough, with our allies and our trading partners.
Who are our allies at the moment? I'm not sure anybody would be on us if we were on fire.
So that's a very good point. That is a very good point. When I said Canada being one, our first ally, right, to just start there, our neighbor across the border. Let's separate a little bit the policy that the administration is following from the policy that we as a nation, as a country, the majority of us have as a people, going back to the people. Our allies have always been the US, the EU, besides Canada, Mexico has tagged along, and other countries around the world. Do we want to enforce that I mentioned earlier, are we making fuss out of our allies and wanting these alliances to continue? So from a people-to-people relation, we continue to have those strong relations nonetheless. From a trade policy, administrative relations, I am not sure right now who our allies are, because sometimes I look at, Governor Blanchard said it very well, are we in bed with Russia or not? That's a question to be considered. It is a very important question to be considered, and I'm making a political statement, but let's not forget that, because when we're talking about the geopolitics of how the world works, on the one hand, from a press release perspective, we are saying, okay, we are going to continue with the sanctions on Russia. We're going to also have secondary tariffs on Russia for countries that are buying oil from Russia. So in essence, we're making them a foe. But we're making them a foe, right? But on the other hand, from the way how we treated Zelensky when he was at the White House, the conversation seems quite differently. On the other hand, we also have China, don't forget it. China is a military and economic power, one which we're trying to maintain the competitive advantage in a way that perhaps we haven't done so. That is recognized not just by this administration, not just by the Biden administration, not just by Trump 1.0 administration, but also by Obama. It's actually started with Obama-Biden administration, the risk that China presents. So we're keeping the foes, but where our alliances are at this point, I do not know.
Governor, you want to say?
I wanted to mention, I've got to know General Mattis. He was the Secretary of Defense for Donald Trump. He's a career Marine general, 4-star, brilliant, a scholar as well as a battlefield commander. And he gives a standard speech and he says, the most important thing, there are 3 issues that are really important in our national security here in America. Allies, allies, and allies. And so it's not just Canada that's been alienated by the insults of, you're just an appendage of us and we need nothing from you, the daily insults. It's also Western Europe and Europe generally. These are our allies. When they see how we treat Canada, they say, my God, if they're treating Canada like this, their best friend and neighbor and partner, what are we going to get? And of course, they're organizing now to figure out how to do an end run on us, as they should. They are allies. I'm probably the oldest person in this room. And I remember in grade school reading on the Junior Scholastic, the creation of NATO. And I must tell you what a sense of security it gave me during the Cold War. Really. I grew up with the architecture laid in place by Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, and Dwight D. Eisenhower. They created a structure of security, military, economic. We decided to rebuild Europe. By the way, in doing that, they were buying our products and goods. We were getting ahead. They were getting ahead. I feel like I'm part of a blessed generation. Not only did my forefathers win 2 world wars, they created a structure to give us peace and prosperity. And anyone who wants to put that asunder is wrong, wrong, wrong. And that's my message, because most of you didn't grow up like this. We take this for granted, our security, our economy. We take our relationship with Canada for granted. Things are not preordained. It is not written in the stars that we're always going to be successful like we've been. We're not going to be successful unless we face reality and we work hard as citizens of Michigan, the United States, and the world. And that's the message we need to make. Can't help myself.
Can I make a point about China, not a point in Chinese, but about China? Building on Aida's point.
If you can make a point in Chinese, I will be really impressed.
For the first time. The point that Aida made, I think, is incredibly important. China is not just the United States' greatest security threat, economic and trade threat. China is the Western world's greatest threat from a security standpoint, from an economic standpoint. Every country plays perhaps maybe a little bit unfair from time to time. China does it at a wholesale level. The only way for the Western world, the industrialized world, whatever you want to say it, the partners that Aida mentioned, the North American alliance, EU, Asia Pacific, right? The only way, given China's, frankly, very strong competitive advantages, to combat the Chinese economic and national security threats is to do it together. And I'll take that. And for someone who's worked in Washington and national policy for a bulk of my career, it's the end game I don't get, right? How do going to war, either verbal war or perhaps actual war, who knows with this guy, I don't understand the strategy if our biggest threat is China and we're focused on, beating up our friends.
It's the lost opportunities, right, that we really have to be worried about here. Last year, both Canada and the United States put the 100% duties on Chinese EVs.
Yeah.
We put the same tariffs. Canada's not against tariffs when it's dealing with unfair trade. Let's be absolutely clear on that. And we put them on China last year. We have been working since the last Trump administration, with the Trump administration, take one, with the Biden administration, on bringing back supply chains to North America that we need to compete. We are in the first lap of an Olympic marathon to save our manufacturing sector across this border versus China. And if we start dividing ourselves, the only winner, and Governor Whitmer said this very eloquently, I thought, in the State of the State. When we lose Canada, we're saying yes. When we say no to Canada, we're saying yes to China. And I know from every conversation I've had with business leaders in this state that is a widely held sentiment. And we need to figure out a way to be able to articulate that in a way that engages leadership in Washington to return to that primary challenge that we are facing as both the United States and Canada.
It's interesting. Governor, I'm curious, is there a possibility, though, that what Donald Trump is doing is just rattling cages? That he's found over time that if you make enough threats, somebody will come along and cut you a better deal, and none of this will ever actually end up being, that it's just strategic bluster.
I think that's part of how he operates. The problem is that other people, other countries, listen to his rhetoric and realize it is so damaging that it makes it harder for them, if they were to cut a deal, to do it. It's just, that's what I think is going on. I mean, I don't know what to tell you other than...
we don't have much, that's what's crazy right now. We don't have much clarity, really, even now, as to what's going to happen 2 days hence, right?
He may not even know. I mean, it's hard. We're going to find out, but...
Yeah, that was what I was hearing a lot of, right? Was art of the deal. Yeah. This is leverage. He understands the basic economics of it. But frankly, one of the real through lines to his economic views has been the value of tariffs. And the reality that we have been experiencing since March 4th, is clear that he is wanting to give this a run. And, President McKinley tried this too, and he's referred to President McKinley a lot. President McKinley, before he died, when he was assassinated, had changed his mind completely on the value of tariffs because the reality is that it inhibits the ability of the United States to grow.
Well, the export world in the late 1800s was agricultural products and textiles. I mean, I was thinking of the way that textiles would work in the modern economy now was if the thread came from Mexico and then we sent it to Canada to be dyed and turned into fabric and then sent back to the United States to be cut adding buttons and zippers from China. That's just not the world that we're in now.
Tin cans.
One more piece of good news.
Yes.
President Trump's nominated person to be ambassador to Canada is former member of Congress, Pete Hoekstra of Michigan. Pete Hoekstra was a member of Congress for 8 terms, with some distinction, chair of our House Intelligence Committee.
Right.
He said, well, the other party were friends, I might add, but he was also ambassador to the Netherlands. He is eminently qualified to be ambassador to Canada or just about anywhere. He does have the ear of President Trump. I've spoken with him. I said, you got a big job, but you're up to it, Pete. So I think he will be helpful to a reasonable degree, and I think that's good for Michigan and good for our country.
We need to wrap things up, but Colin, I wanted to give you the last word if I could, because I remember, I want to go back to, this has been such a special relationship that's existed for so long. A couple months ago, after these tariffs were first threatened and announced, I'm watching the Red Wings play at Vancouver, and I'm listening to the Vancouver crowd booing the Stars and Stripes, and it broke my heart. I'm curious as to what you think, how irreparable you think the damage is right now, and give me your more personal view of what's happened with this relationship.
Yeah, to be clear, this is booing really bad policy, and it came up because it is emotional, and that is an emotional moment when anthems are played. This past weekend, we had in Windsor International Film Festival focused on the Canada-U.S. relationship. It was films like Argo and Come From Away that told these moments where we have come together and supported each other. And it evoked those memories of, the water bombers coming from Quebec to try to put the fires out over LA. It is the enduring relationship on a people-to-people level, and I'm not just saying that because my wife's a Michigander, on a people-to-people basis across the country. This is an enduring partnership. And there's a natural gravity to economics which I fundamentally believe will reestablish our economic connections in the long term as well. But are we facing a moment of deep distress on the Canadian side about the loss of something that maybe we've taken too much for granted, but is at the bedrock of our understanding of our environment and our world? Yeah, that's going to take some time to repair.
Sandy, Colin, Aida, and Governor Blanchard, a round of applause for our panel here today. Want to quickly thank Citizens for being our presenting sponsor for this terrific forum. Thank all of you for being here on this terribly important matter. We've got a strolling lunch waiting for you outside. Have a great day, and I hope we'll see you again soon. Thanks.
And our thanks to Devin Scillian. Thank you, Devin.
My pleasure.
You can tell I'm a man of strong opinions.
Distinguished guests, this concludes our program. Thank you for attending the 2025 State of the Region, presented by Citizens.